So you've heard what people think about when they think about heritage. But what I would like to do today, and particularly Melissa Russell, who I'll introduce in just a moment, would like to do today, is take you down a new woodland path at Heritage and tell you the story of our STEM school. And before we do that, we'd like to share with you that, in fact, our mission does include rhododendrons, hydrangeas, old cars, but it actually also includes STEM education. And so take a look up here at, let's see, this needs to advance, there we go. Our mission, we celebrate the landscapes and culture of our region, which we consider to be southeastern Mass and the Cape. And we inspire people of all ages to explore, discover, and learn together. We do this through excellence in horticulture, as you know, garden design, outdoor discovery, STEM education, and the exhibition of great collections. So to take you down a new path today, I am delighted to introduce the founding director of the 100 Acre School at Heritage. This year the school is celebrating its 10th anniversary. So please welcome Melissa Russell, who's the director of our 100 Acre School. Thank you.
I'm so excited to be here today. It's so nice to be able to speak to all of you about the 100 Acre School. But in order to do that, I need to kind of fill a little background knowledge around education. I want to tell a little story about myself and how I wound up here. So I am a Mount Holyoke graduate, and then I went on and got my master's degree at Lesley University in curriculum instruction, and I am just a total geek about thinking about how people learn, the process of learning, how learning starts, how things are interconnected. And so when I had the opportunity to connect with Heritage, when I was on maternity leave from my public school teaching job, I never left Heritage. I stayed. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of that story today. So first, before I get there, I want to ask you, what is your earliest childhood memory? Don't yell it out, just hold it in your head. Don't stress too long, just take the first thing that comes to you. No debate, right? All right. And will you please think about where that memory would fall? You know, will it fall in the theme of connecting with others? Was there some sort of connection with others in that memory? If there was, raise your hand. Yep, that's going to be a big one, right? Was there some sort of connection to nature in that memory? Or being in the outdoors, observing something or a living thing, right? Yep. Was there some sort of connection to being curious or excited about what you were doing, right? Yeah. So when I've asked this question, and it really doesn't matter who I ask, many people will say, oh yes, it's these three. Way back when I started asking this question, I would, kind of tease out what people were saying, and I boiled it down to these three, that now I just say, was it yours in one of these three? And so these memories, these earliest memories, the fact that they line up in connection with others, something related to nature and something related to curiosity, have me thinking a little bit about, those ideas are really connected to what we call 21st century skills, or skills that we expect our workforce to have as they enter it in adulthood, right? So when we think of 21st century skills, we're talking about things like critical thinking, creativity, leadership, productivity, social skills. But we're also thinking about technology literacy, how people communicate with one another, and all of these skills that we want to see in our adults of the future, they have to start early. We have to make sure that they start early. So as someone who's really passionate about thinking about learning and teaching, I now need to think about how can I build all of these skills into our classrooms so that when we graduate our students out of high schools and colleges, they will have had an entire lifetime of building skills, not just a moment in time in high school or a moment in time in college. So J.D. Chesloff, who is from the Mass Business Roundtable, he has this great quote, which continues to kind of extend this idea of we really need to start early in our education and thinking about, I'm going to get to it in a moment, STEM, early in our education. He had someone in his organization come up with this tire quote, which I love. So if you're Michelin tires and you have a hole in your supply chain of rubber, you immediately go to the beginning of that supply chain and fix it, right? Well, that makes sense. That's just supply and demand, right? But we also need to apply that same thinking, he says, to our workforce development and to the education of our young children. So if you're going to use this strategy to train the workforce of the future, it makes a ton of sense to start at the beginning, and early childhood is that strategy. Let's see. Does anybody know this professor? This is a picture from MIT. I couldn't resist putting it in. But here's just another tidbit. I do have to say that I'm currently getting my doctorate at UMass, focusing on education leadership in STEM. So you're going to see a lot of these kind of nerdy components added in here, and this is just kind of a cool fact. The National Forum of Early Childhood Policy and Programs has found that high-quality early childhood programs can yield a $4 to $9 return on every dollar spent. That's typically the research comes out of high school. So if I spend $100 in a program in preschool, that same skill development when I get to high school might cost me $900 to achieve. So the investment, return on investment here is pretty awesome. So by age 5, about 90% of an adult brain is formed. And this is why we call early childhood the formative years. So 90% of the synapses in our brain are already formed by the time we're entering kindergarten. And we'll add to those synapses, right? We'll add on more complex ideas, but the basic structure of what's there is built by age 5. So it's really a great optimal time to make sure that we get the most synapses in our brains built. And I just love this. This is another fabulous picture from our school. Doesn't he just look like he's soaking up that math, right? Like really, you can't pay kids to do this. He's just like, whoa, look at this ruler, right? This is a whole 12 inches. I just love it. So Harvard's here too, so I made sure that I didn't forget Harvard in my pictures. This is a study that just so happens to be in my research too, from the Center for the Developing Child out of Harvard University. And they have stated it's easier and less costly to form strong brain circuits during the early years than it is to intervene or fix them later. And so this kind of teal line is showing the brain's ability to change versus the amount of the orange line is the amount of effort for such change. And you'll notice that they kind of intersect right before people turn 30. But look at how easy it is and the amount of effort is at 2, 4, 6, 8 years old. Really kind of neat to think about. They're very malleable brains. They're soaking up everything, right? So hopefully I have given you just enough teasers here to say, yes, I think early education is important. So now I want to transition into why STEM education. Why is that my lens of thinking about early education? So if I were to step back, and I know I have at least one teacher in the room, so that's good. If I were to step back and look at the 90s and the research that educators were looking at in the early 90s, we were focusing on something called the 20,000 word gap. right? And basically that meant, depending on different life experiences of young children, by the time they got to kindergarten, they may have heard by 20,000 less words than another peer. Typically that was an equity component. And so a lot of the research in the 90s was looking at literacy and filling the 20,000 word gap. Okay, so if you were in college in the 1990s, a lot of our education coursework was around, we have to really fill this gap, we need to focus on literacy. As that continued to develop, we got to the end of the 90s, early 2000s, and because we were focusing so much on literacy, we started to really bring in the brain and thinking like, oh, but there's all these synapses developing during that time. Brain building is really, really important in early childhood, and the types of experiences children are having during their formative years is really important. So we went into this next phase of education research that's really described as brain building in progress, and there's actually a committee in Boston that had that title, Brain Building in Progress. I served on it for 2 years, it was fascinating. And then we came out of that brain building period of research, and we started to realize that when we give the brain something concrete, almost like a springboard to jump off of, something concrete to connect literacy to connect our social skills to connect our conversations to, that concrete item actually makes stickier memories in our brain, for lack of better words. So we want to create sticky memories. How can we do that? STEM. STEM then jumped into the forefront as being the vehicle for these sticky memories. Those outdoor memories, right? Being outdoors in nature, hands-on experiences, experiential learning, connecting to science, manipulating pieces, thinking about how technology helps us, building all sorts of different things with a variety of materials. All these pieces started to really explode and give educators the ability to connect to other domains. So this interdisciplinary teaching became very, very popular. And so that's why I think STEM is really, it has this, this powerful opportunity. I also have to share with you my favorite graphic. If any of you have ever had the experience of living with an infant, you might not have noticed that they go through the scientific method all the time. And we all go through the scientific method all the time, or have this scientific lens. So here we have up at the top, a little yellow clothed infant. He or she looks down and says, what is this green thing on the ground? They just created a hypothesis, right? Then they pick it up, because they pick up everything, right? They look at it, and they're really like, what is this? I think that this might be food. Is this edible? Right? So then they perform their experiment, and they put it right in their mouth, right? They chomp on it. Is this food? Do I like the taste of this? They then take it out of their mouth, and they analyze their data. Do I like this green thing that I found on the floor? No, I do not. I'm going to share out my results. They're crying, right? But we know as scientists, you can't just do your experiment in a vacuum. You then need to share it with someone else. So here is my unbeknownst friend here in the blue shirt. Here, you try this green thing that I just found on the floor and conduct your own experiment, right? So we know kids go through these really curious moments, and they go through the scientific method naturally. And what our job as educators is to really support them thinking through all these pieces and not squash their creativity, right? Not make them follow the directions all the time, not have teachers tell them what they need to be doing, but allow them to be curious. So this has really shaped who I am as an educator and where I think we need to allow young children to go, fully exploring and being supported as we go along. So my philosophy of education is really rooted in hands-on education, I think kids should be outdoors often, often, often. And a little sneak peek, the students at our school, the 100 Acre School, which is pre-K to grade 2, spend 2 to 3 hours outside daily. Yes, even my second graders. And yes, they still cover everything they need to do, right? They still learn everything. So I think that connection to the outdoors is really important. I also think STEM is a springboard to really rich multidisciplinary learning. Let's see, did I just, yep, okay. So let me tell you a little story about how Heritage ended up with the school. There's this magical place at Heritage called Hidden Hollow. It opened in 2010. I did not work at Heritage when it opened. Prior to it opening, I came to Heritage on the day of Hidden Hollow opening as a parent. I was on maternity leave at that time. And I discovered this amazing outdoor education area. And within that area, there were all these interesting activities occurring. So we had a water area, we have a create area, we have a running area, we have music areas, we have a stage, we have engineering occurring. All these amazing pieces. To me, it looked like an outdoor classroom, right? So on my very first visit to Hidden Hollow, of course I have to ask, who thought of this idea? What is happening here? This is amazing. This is everything I've ever thought of when I think about education. And quite honestly, I just haven't left Heritage since that first day, stumbling into Hidden Hollow. But this is a 2-acre dry kettle hole that Heritage decided to empty out and carve into it this beautiful landscape of outdoor education, encouraging young families to feel safe in the outdoors and to come and play and explore in the outdoors. So after visiting on that first day, about a week later, I was writing curriculum for Hidden Hollow and really engrossing myself in this new venture of outdoor education. And as we were offering different parent-child classes, we were connecting with families as they were visiting, we kept hearing over and over again, but Melissa, we just want to leave our kids here with you all day. Can you just maybe have a preschool here in Hidden Hollow? And I'm like, oh, that's really nice of you. Yes, we love playing here too. But honestly, people can only say that so many times while you're ignoring them, and then you realize, I think they actually might have a point. They want to have this outdoor connection. They like the kind of experiential learning we're doing. They like playing with worms in our worm bins. They like doing ball and ramp challenges down the hillsides. And so we decided to kind of do a feasibility study in 2012, and we realized it was the perfect time to open a school. But we didn't want to build a school. We just wanted to temporarily convert one of our museum galleries that had not been using into a classroom, because just in case it doesn't work out, we want to be able to kind of switch gears and go to something else. Well, I'm here today, so it's 10 years later, it really worked out. So we converted this beautiful gallery into 2 classrooms. Our first year open, we had 16 students. They had a great time, and it's evolved since then. So again, let me bring you back to STEM as a springboard. So I think STEM is just this beautiful springboard between all domains of learning. So when I say STEM, I'm not ignoring the arts. I'm not ignoring literacy. I'm not ignoring social connections. I'm just saying I'm rooting it in that idea of STEM, right? I'm rooting it in the study of insects, arachnids, and earthworms. I'm rooting it in discovering flight, birds to machines, right? I'm rooting it in those concepts, and I'm letting the curriculum explode from there. We're using sophisticated language, and that language pays homage to the 1990s, that 20,000 word gap. Here we have a picture of students dissecting a sunflower. So they have tweezers and they're pulling out all of the seeds in the sunflower. They're looking at all the different parts. They're talking about the petals. They're talking about the leaves, the stems, and so on. This is all normal occurrences as you look into the classroom. And we're using all sorts of fabulous terms with them. So you will hear all sorts of things. You'll hear photosynthesis in a 4-year-old classroom, and students will develop their own definition of photosynthesis. They'll say, okay, I know that's how plants make food. And they're going to build on that knowledge as they go along. By age 6, I expect them to have a little bit more mature definition of that. By the time they get into high school, I expect them to be able to give me everything they know about photosynthesis, right? But we're using those words and we're not substituting them with simplistic words. STEM is also a way just to engage in hands-on learning, using all of their senses and making connections again. So here you can see, here is a group of preschoolers that had learned about rulers and measuring tapes. And when we went out on the grounds, what are they doing? They're now taking the circumference of all of the trees at Heritage and comparing them as to which one is wider than another tree. So they're able to use measuring tapes in a really great way and then formulate some comparisons amongst them. Measuring tapes occurs every year in the fall. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute, but we measure everything. We measure the trees, we measure distances, we measure lengths of leaves and compare them, and so on. So the teachers at the 100 Acre School, I will say that they're amazing because I get to work with them every day, but they really have shifted from maybe what you recall as a youngster, where the teacher maybe sat at the front of the room and dictated or spilled out all the knowledge. Now we look at teachers, if we're looking through the STEM lens, as a facilitator. So they're observing what children are asking, what they're talking about, what they know, what they're really interested in, and they're extending those ideas. And I think that's a really special nuance there. So I normally do not put this many words on a slide, but I wanted you to see some of the different titles we have for our investigations. I have just been picking pre-K, but we also have great titles in kindergarten, first and second grade. But let me tell you a little bit about how the curriculum evolves. So we're not a school where we begin the year and we open up to page 1 and we say, this is what we're teaching today. And we get to second day and we say, this is what we're teaching today. We really let the curriculum emerge from our students. And what do I mean by that is, at the very beginning of the year, we start with an investigation called Using STEM Tools for Investigations. And we introduce them to binoculars, magnifying glasses, measuring tapes, scissors, every kind of tool you can think of that a child might need to use to fully explore their world. Pipettes. Tweezers, I don't know, I can't think of, there's lots and lots of them, but we go through all these different tools. And while we're exploring these tools for about 7 weeks or so, the teachers are watching and observing students and what they really get excited for. And then the teachers can teach any of these investigations in any order. But how do they pick which investigation to go to next? Well, this is what happened so far this year. In my blue classroom, they started with STEM tools, and those students were the students that loved the rulers and the measuring tapes. So they got so excited about measuring different things out in nature that the teachers said, okay, we're going to use rulers and measuring tapes as our link, and the next investigation that we're going to do is studying trees. So we did a lot of measuring of trees, and then we transitioned into different topics around trees. Well, it also was the fall, and so what happens in the fall? Leaves change color, all sorts of neat things. So then the teacher said, okay, after another 5 weeks, we're going to transition to exploring color, because now I can use that idea of leaves changing in the fall, and we went into exploring color. So they're exploring color, they're using pipettes, they're mixing color, and doing all sorts of things around ideas related to color. Camouflage comes up, right? The kids are absolutely thrilled with the idea of camouflage. They're looking for animals outside. How are they using camouflage? They desperately want to find an owl. Okay, I'm not going to tell them we might not see an owl during the daytime, but I'm going to say, let's keep looking, right? So because they were so fascinated with owls, what did the teachers decide to go to next? They're currently studying discovering flight, birds and machines. So they use that concept of owls to transition into the next investigation. And that happens every year. So every year our curriculum evolves because of what the students are curious about. And every year we're able to cover all of the state standards and then some, fully immersed in the curriculum. Our other pre-K classroom, we have 2 of them, started with STEM tools. They went a totally different direction, right? So they started with STEM tools, and this class could not get enough of a pipette. That's like a measuring, a medicine dropper. They were trying to suck up puddle water from pipettes. They were, mixing colors with pipettes and so on. And so the teacher said, okay, we're going to take pipettes as our focus, then we're going to go into exploring colors. Exploring colors was awesome. As they were doing exploring colors, they said, now we're going to move into becoming pattern makers because we can create patterns with colors. So as they were doing discovering pattern makers or becoming pattern makers, they started talking about how sometimes you have to do things in correct orders. So for example, like I need to go get my shoes from the closet, then I need to untie the laces, I need to put them on my feet, and then I can tie them and go outside, right? So they started talking about kind of order of doing things. And so what did the teacher say? These kids, they would come up with orders of all sorts of things. They were drawing pictures of orders. They said, we're going to go to kitchen chemistry next and conducting science experiments because I think they're going to really like the idea of creating recipes and so on. And so again, we've evolved with what their curiosity is. We also have thought about our classrooms. So when we are in the classroom, how can we just infuse that lens of STEM a little bit more? So on the left are kind of traditional names of what you have in the centers of a pre-K classroom. So that's almost like different spaces of the classroom. And on the right are what we call them, what we actually call them in our classroom. So for example, the blocks area, think about really young children, there's always a block building area, right? But what is blocks? Blocks is really engineering. Why am I not calling it engineering? I'm calling it what it is. So we have engineering station right on the area in our blocks building area. Other fun ones everyone loves this one. So when I have new parents that come to the school, they're coming for a tour and they look around and they see all these names on the wall of here's my, engineering area, here's my research area, here's my recording area, reflection area, and then they pause. And their eyes get big and they see dissection area. And I say, no, it's not the formaldehyde smell of 7th or 8th grade science. We're talking about tinkering, taking things apart, putting it back together, puzzles, right? So we call it dissection. This is the building blocks of what they might do later as they're dissecting things. So again, just this kind of purposeful lens changes the focus of our teachers in the classroom and also our students. And they don't call it, I'm going to the puzzle center. They say, I'm going over to dissection today. And it's awesome. It is, it's all language, right? We're giving them those tools because they are able to use them. So here's some pictures this week from the class that was doing kitchen chemistry, science experiments. During the beginning of the day, we asked students what they're going to learn about today during our hypothesis time. And so the question was, we gave all sorts of different groups, and they were all able to give some great food groups. Like even Josie, she really likes to eat rice. Well, that's a grain. Strawberries, that's a fruit, and so on. But again, we're connecting all this together. The picture over here on the left, as you remember from Tuesday, it was snowing or raining. we were still outside. The students found a kitchen chemistry item outside. They found the top of a pumpkin. So we had lots of discussion about who could have been eating the pumpkin, how is it decomposing. And then the picture over here on the right is the teachers are letting students create their own recipe with a repertoire of items that we have available in the classroom. So this is a particular child's recipe that included milk, cornstarch, some food coloring, and a few other things. And other students then had to create their recipe. So again, we're not just telling them, here's a recipe, you must follow it, but here's some materials, what do you think you can make from it? Did it work out well? Would you want to eat it? Right? So then we can talk through all those pieces. So now I'm going to pause and I'm going to show you a video, but I don't want to stream it from online because you know how sometimes that is effective and is not. So I'm going to play it right from my computer. So here's a view into the school, a video for you. Well, welcome to the 100 Acre School. My name is Melissa Russell, and I'm the director of the school.
We've loved it. Started during COVID and post-COVID with our second one here now. We do the summer camp, we do the school, but we love it. We would live here if we could.
They help them get interested in learning, and that's, I think, the biggest thing for us. We love the school.
We saw just how it affected her critical thinking. It was affecting her entire life. So not just at school, she wasn't just learning things, but she was applying what she was learning at home in everyday situations. And then to see now how her learning is expanding, and I think what's great too is that the teachers communicate what they're learning at school, so we can support her learning at home and ask her questions to talk through things that she did during her day.
The 100 Acre School is a part of Heritage Museums and Gardens, and we get to come onto the grounds every day, almost like a field trip. Our students get to explore the museums even when the museum is closed. Our students are out on the grounds year-round. We have wonderful connections with our horticulture team, our curation team, our education programming team.
They have free reign over the entire grounds that they use every single day. So it's not just about learning nature either, it's about learning how to be a steward of the earth.
We are investing in her education. The building blocks of critical thinking now are here. She's learning how to think. She's learning how to think through things, and no matter where she goes, she'll be able to apply those things when she moves on.
So it's a wonderful, special place to know that we are part of 100 acres of learning opportunities and part of this wonderful cultural institution that is committed to outdoor education, connecting people to nature, connecting people to art, thinking about how we impact the world. So our school, like I said earlier, opened in 2014, the fall of 2014. We had 16 students, and for the first 5 or so years, we had just preschool, 1, 2, or 3 classes. By about 2019, we were regularly hearing, Melissa, please open kindergarten, please open kindergarten. So we opened kindergarten. And the first year of having kindergarten, COVID occurred right in March. So we closed early, but we were able to open in the fall of 2020. We actually were able to open in person for all of our students in pre-K and kindergarten every day. Our students came in person and were out and about on the grounds. We leaned into going outdoors more, and we were still able to fill that need during that time. So you do see our class of 2021, there's a little dip. Also in 2021, we had already been thinking about expanding the school because we were not necessarily always turning people away, but we were always filling right to capacity, and then people on the wait list either had to find another school or whatnot. And so we knew that there was a little bit more of a need, and we wanted to have more space for preschool. And again, I kept having my kindergarten families now say, but what about first grade? What about second grade? So in 2022, our first year opening after we renovated another museum gallery in that same building, linked the two wings of that building together to become the full 100 Acre School. We have about a 9,000 square foot outdoor playground space just for our students, and then we use the entire museum's gardens and grounds as our classroom. So in 2022, we jumped up into around the 70 range, which is typically where we are. Next year, we expect to be closer to 80 students, and we're at our pretty much cap there. But this little risky idea to do this fabulous hands-on experiential learning STEM-focused preschool that we started in 2012, the board of directors said, okay, Melissa, let's see if it'll work out. This risky idea exploded into just a wonderful component of heritage, and I think it has a long life ahead of it. So thank you so much for having me come today. I hope that I piqued your interest in STEM and early education and how valuable it is. And certainly I will try to answer any questions you have. But thank you for having me. Anybody? Yeah, go for it, Brian.
How disappointed are your second graders when they go into a regular third grade?
So I haven't. So this is the first year of second graders that we've had. So I have not had the experience of second going to third. But I will tell you, when we were just a preschool and kindergarten, many of my kiddos that were then going off to first grade or kindergarten, if they didn't come to us, a couple things. The parents would say, they're not really as tired as they were when they came to your school, right? Because we're out and about on the grounds miles a day, right? But the students were saying that they missed being outside, because we are outside about 2 to 3 hours a day, even in the winter, even in the rain. We went out yesterday when it was super cold. And then the other humorous component, we had a little kiddo come back and say, Miss Melissa, actually it was to someone else, but we'll say it was me. They said, guess what? I'm like, what? My school does not have a carousel at it. So their whole world had been museum galleries. They don't have a Model T there. What do you mean? They don't have, a hydrangea garden. They don't have a carousel. So they miss all of these really important pieces. So
they're spoiled.
Yeah. No. I know, isn't it great? I love that we can share all these things with them. Yeah.
So what's your student to teacher ratio?
Yeah, it's really low. So in pre-K, we have 3 teachers with either a max of 18 or 20 students, so it's about 1 to 7. All of my teachers have at least a bachelor's degree or higher. They are all just as nerdy as I am and love reading and thinking and talking about education. And then in our elementary grades, we are about 1 to 14 for elementary, so kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And then we have an additional staff member that floats between those rooms. So sometimes they are also at a 1 to 7.
Because I was thinking that you're very open-ended, encouraging curiosity. It's a sort of intensive teacher-student ratio. How practical is it for a regular public school?
Yeah.
Situation where there are maybe 25 to 1 teacher?
Yep. Well, oftentimes, even with that 25 to 1, they'll have other people rotating in and out during the day, potentially. But I think it's really more a lens of, can I observe what students are doing, and think about what that means as an educator and what that means in what they understand, rather than being focused on this is what I need to do next as my role. So it's really a shift in philosophy from the teacher, to be recognizing that is a really valuable observation.
Clearly, it takes that very mature thinking,
Mhm.
that scientific kind of STEM thinking to encourage this kind of curiosity.
Yeah.
I don't see it in a public school setting.
Mm-mm.
The teacher just doesn't have time for that. So that is a pity.
It
The
is.
other asset is your outdoor.
Yes, yeah,
So it's a wonderful school that you
yeah. Thank you so much. And you're also, what?
And the language you're using to show that this is engineering, technology, etc.
Absolutely, it's so important, yes.
So, I mean, do you see teaming up, you're hosted by MIT and Harvard and education, that somehow we find a way to disseminate more broadly to what my wife is answering?
Yeah, so we have at Heritage done quite a bit of teacher training and done a lot of work in the early childhood and even lower elementary levels. We were fortunate enough, so here's another little tidbit. There are so many things to tell you. When we first opened the school, the state of Massachusetts also had an amazing grant at that time that was focused on STEM. And the purpose of that grant was to convince early childhood educators that science, technology, engineering, and math were developmentally appropriate at those lower age levels. And Heritage and myself were given the largest chunk of that grant. And so we wrote curriculum specific for the state, that the state still uses, to demonstrate to others in the field that this is absolutely developmentally appropriate. And so I did a lot of teacher training, a lot of workshops around those topics with the state. And then because of that work, in 2016, we got an enormous grant from the W.H. Kellogg Foundation, who asked us to look at our curriculum, which is, for the most part, very specific to our school, because I was writing it, in the moment, and try to extend it to broader locations that are not on the campus of a beautiful Heritage Museums and Gardens. And so then during that grant process, we piloted a rewritten curriculum so we've actually done 3 versions of this curriculum now, but this new version, we piloted it in a preschool in Brockton, Massachusetts, and in New Orleans, Louisiana. And we had studies done at both of those locations about implementation of these STEM philosophies and really supporting the teachers to grow. I stumbled across this video the other day, and it was one of the teachers from the New Orleans site that was being interviewed in 2019, and she was still using the verbiage from the curriculum and still talking about how that has lived on in their program. And I just stumbled across it. It hadn't been shared with us, and it just made me so proud. So I know that even though we're just a drop in the water, you could say, that I do feel like our ripples will spread outward and that we can share outward. I also now teach at the college level, so I teach at Bridgewater State, I teach a project-based learning class in STEM, and one on observation and assessment, 2 things that I love talking about. So again, we just keep trying to share out these ideas. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, is there much room within your curriculum for non-STEM topics like art, music, language?
Yes, that's a super important part of our curriculum, in that those pieces, especially for young students that are not writing information yet, verbal, music, art, are all their way of demonstrating what they know. So we do lots of drawing. What do you observe here? What do you now think? Those sequence problems, they were all drawing those out. First I get my shoes, then I put them on, then I can go outside. So a lot of those pieces allow us to extend the learning and allow them to demonstrate what they know. There are so many great songs that we can incorporate that extend science pieces. And so it's all woven in throughout. But you'll find that we use more nonfiction, so we do a lot of songs specifically around science topics. We have more nonfiction books, or I would say pretty equal fiction, nonfiction books in our classrooms, but that is more than what you see in a traditional classroom. And we just do a lot to really think about the whole child as a learner. So if we were only to focus on science, technology, engineering, that wouldn't really support the whole child. So we have to really incorporate everything. So literacy becomes the building of the background knowledge. Art becomes the demonstration of what you know. The music and even the social emotional components of how do you talk to one another, how do you express what you're thinking, how do you use words correctly, all those pieces weave together. So it's a great experience. Way in the back.
I remember that it may still be true that Mount Holyoke College produces more women PhDs in the STEM field than any other school.
They do.
And
we're hugely known.
Women's liberal arts college. How does that happen? And did you get your passion for this? What are they doing that makes it?
Well, I would say yes. I loved going to Mount Holyoke. I'm still very active. I was congratulating them over here because I'm a former president of the Mount Holyoke Club of Cape Cod. So I was like, I know how much work you're going to do. But I think the idea of just that constructivist style of education was very prevalent at Mount Holyoke. So that hands-on, you can do anything, you know, go into the science lab and jump in. Piece really influenced me. My father was also a science teacher. He was a biology major at Middlebury. And so science and being outdoors was just part of my life. And I realize now, looking back, that many young children do not have that as part of their life. We have seen a decline in families feeling safe going outdoors, taking a walk in the woods. I was so excited that was one of the silver linings of the pandemic, is that more families took time to walk outdoors than they had in decades. So I know that was part of my excitement around STEM. I've always had a STEM brain, and I knew that was a piece that I wanted to bring into any education component that I did. When I taught in the public school system, I taught 4th grade for a long time, I would see kids for the first time ever garden, and we would be outside putting in a garden in the front of the building, and they didn't know how to take the plant out of the seedling package, and I thought, gosh, they're 10. I want them to have this experience. I want them to get dirty. I want them to, really get invested in what they're doing. So I think the more that we have experiences and tap into those experiences, the better. Yep. Yeah.
I want to attend.
I know, right? Well, one of the parents said that, right?
So your knowledge and energy is infectious, and so this is a question for both you and Anne.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the concepts you're talking about that, in this whole curriculum, has that or does that translate into heritage programs for adult learners?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to speak to that one?
Well, I would say that the programs for adult learners were there before the school. And so we've always, at the super heart of our mission is education. And whether it's educating people about horticulture or educating them about art or some of our other objects, that has been central to the way that we interact with our community. And so I would say that, yes, it translates, it in fact predates that work. But the more I think Melissa and Hidden Hollow becomes a place that we young children thrive, the more we also involve adults in it. I mean, adults are active at Hidden Hollow as well. And so the way that we think about who our audiences are, it's not just children. It's children and their families, not just adults, but adults and children.
And I would think that also translates to the school, because we talk a lot about the things that we're learning in the classroom, but as parents, we might not remember them from when we went to school, right? So when we're talking about a particular term, I'm trying to think of like even different names of insects, right? That might not be on a parent's mindset, right? That might not be something they can just dig out of their background knowledge. So the teachers also are educating our families about what we're doing in the classroom so that the families can then take that information and share it with their students and have great conversations. And it takes a really thoughtful approach to do that. So incorporating all of those terms into our newsletters, into our daily communications, explaining a photograph of students doing that create your own recipe, explaining why are we doing this? This is to help them learn XYZ. Recipes have ingredients and steps and so on. But reconnecting families to those concepts so that they don't feel nervous about, I have no idea what they're talking about when they're talking about these insects. What is the difference between a sow bug and a pill bug? I have no idea. Well, the students all know now because that was one of their questions from earlier in the year. And we can then share that out to families so that they can have that conversation. Yeah? Oh, there's a few more.
I want to thank you both. Great trip.
There's 2 more questions. They just keep going. Okay.
Do you have scholarships for kids who can't afford to go otherwise?
We finally do, yes. We have a financial assistance fund that's now endowed. And so this year we have 8 of our 64 students getting financial assistance. And hopefully we'll have more next year. So, yep, very exciting. Yes.
Yeah, I'm interested in the reaction in Louisiana. This all seems very progressive.
It is, right? It's not traditional.
Yeah, it wouldn't strike me that Louisiana would be a place that I would think would go for it. What's happened there?
So I don't know too much about what's happened post, but I know when we introduced the curriculum there, we did a lot of professional development trainings where they were watching videos of myself and other colleagues explaining what we were doing in the classroom. There was conversations amongst themselves about how they were going to implement. We had 2 education specialists that actually flew down and spent time working with them. And as far as I know, everything that we implemented down there went very, very well. And the idea was, again, to kind of help them think through, can we incorporate STEM in a purposeful way? And the biggest takeaway was, well, I actually already do STEM. I just didn't recognize that I was doing STEM. I didn't know to call out that I was doing STEM. Oh yeah, we play with blocks all the time. Oh my God, that's engineering. And so that is usually the biggest takeaway. And like I said, I just found this video when I was researching for one of my courses, and I was like, oh my God, this is someone from the program. And they said, we got a grant in this, and I'm like, that's our grant! So it was very exciting to see that it does live on. But I think just taking it apart and explaining that this is not rocket science I'm talking about. This is really thinking about the building blocks of learning. Recognizing the world is filled with science, technology, engineering, and math. They integrate everywhere. They are not siloed components, right? We have to think about how they integrate and help that, because that's what our workforce needs in the future. We don't need students that can list off facts. We don't need them to just regurgitate or check off multiple choice things. We need them to be critical thinkers. We need them to problem solve all of our crazy issues that we could have in the environment, right? So that's what we're trying to formulate. And it is progressive, I know that.
Have you thought about what it would take to disseminate this further?
Yes, yes. I only have so many minutes in my day. But it is something that I hope that will continue to spread.
Can we access a lot of it on the website? So if I went home now, I can...
Yeah, you can visit the website. We have all sorts of information on there. Yep. And you can always email me if you have any other questions. Yep.
You might think of connecting with a couple of very forward-thinking engineering schools like Olin College, because that's how they based on project-based learning and starting by learning by doing.
Yep.
And it's very good.
Thank you.
Have you also thought about partnering with groups on the Cape, like the Cape Cod Bird Club, for example, or some of the model airplane clubs?
So we do a lot of partnering, but they usually come from our families or from people that are connected to the families. So we haven't necessarily reached out to different groups. But I can say last week we had a ER doctor in our kindergarten class because they're studying the human body. She did this amazing presentation to them. We have a pilot coming in next week to talk about to talk to our preschoolers who are studying flight. We have scientists come in. We had this amazing family. They have since graduated out, but he was an ornithological scientist. So he talked all about birds and their impact on the environment. We've had environmental engineers talking about how we need to be more sustainable. We built a rain garden in our playground. We now have I don't even know, is it a 8,000 gallon cistern that channels all the water from our roof into a giant cistern that we then use to water all of our plants, fill our water tables. And